Hey, friends, welcome back to the Prescription of Travel MD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Courtney Downes, and today's conversation is for my doctors who feel successful on paper, but maybe trapped in real life. In fact, even if you're not a physician, I think you're going to learn a lot from her. So, we're talking about physician flexibility, negotiation, career design, and really just creating a career that actually supports the life that you want to live and not just the paycheck. Today's guest is a master negotiator. She's a pediatrician by training, a physician coach, and she's the host of the Black Doctor Collective podcast. She helps physicians really just go after the lives that they want to create. And as someone who's traveled extensively herself, I think she also understands just how important it is that we build this life that leaves room for joy and rest and all of those experiences that happen outside of the hospital. Now, if you're anything like me and you appreciate autonomy and freedom and the joys of travel, if this is speaking your love language, you'll be so glad you tuned in today. So let's get into it. So, welcome back to the show, everyone. And huge welcome to Dr. Sheneka, who is joining me here today. I am so excited to talk to you about your story. I want to know all about who you are, how you got started. So, why don't we start there?
Yeah. Oh, goodness. I feel like whenever you talk about a med school journey, it's like when I was 6, my parents told me I wanted to be a pediatrician, and that's like actually true. But my story in terms of like how my career shaped up was really, at the end of my global health fellowship for me. So I did my peds residency. And even then, I was kind of like, I don't love the lifestyle of like, working all the time. And like, I really wanted to actually travel, and I wrote it down, like, I wanna be paid to travel. How do I make that happen? And that's how I started this global health fellowship where, you literally are paid through fellowship to travel to different sites and, like, do this work, and at the end of it, I was like, "I'm still a general pediatrician, like, hmm, okay. What do I do now?" And I was super burnt out. So, I took some time off right after fellowship, and I was trying to figure out like the question of like, why am I burnt out? Why is everyone burnt out? Right. Like, I felt like everyone was having the conversation. Burnout was like the new, keyword. And I was like, everyone's burnt out. How do I solve this problem of burnout? Because it's not enough to solve.
And we're still having these conversations.
Yes, literally. I mean, we were having it in residency, right? Like there was I was part of the wellness committee and, all these things. But I really was like, well, what is the root cause of this? And for me, it felt like it was the loss of autonomy. It felt like being a cog in the wheel. It felt like, I did all this work and I was not being recognized. No one was asking me how I wanted to practice, how I wanted to show up at work, and how I wanted to live my life. And like, as a trainee, no one asks you anything. So, I came out and I was like, well, if I had the choice, how would I design my career, my lifestyle? And it was like no nights and weekends. I wouldn't be doing 24-hour calls. Like, I would actually be in populations where I love the patients and I get to do patient education and I have time for it. And that's essentially what I set out to create and have created. Right. And then it wasn't enough for me to do it. I'm like, if other people do this, then we get to keep doctors in medicine, especially good ones. And we need doctors where there's always talking about a doctor shortage. So, how do I apply this to other people so that other people stay in medicine? And I developed a coaching program and I'm basically teaching women doctors how to negotiate their contracts, how to negotiate for like, more vacation time, more paternity, like maternity and parental leave, like all these things. So, yeah, that's kind of my story.
And I love that coming from a place of being in residency and, getting my first contract and initially even just the shock of like, okay, this is how much they were going to pay me. Like I was applying for a place and it was close to where my husband was at the time and I knew that's where we were going. And I was like in shock when I saw the number and I was like, this doesn't look like what they told me that they were going to pay me. I'm emergency medicine, new grad. And I think, I've got all these skills. I've got all this potential. I've also got all of this debt that I've got to pay down. And I was just like, so I took my contract to my directors and they looked over and they were like, yeah, that looks like it's a little low. And I remember someone left this like article in like our little cubby box. And it was talking about women in medicine and the challenges that we face in negotiation. And I was like, you know and I still don't know who left it to this day. I kind of have a feeling who may have left it there for me, but, like, it was eye-opening for me, and it definitely changed how and I said, "You know what? I'm not gonna take this." And eventually they came back with, like, almost double the offer. But, they don't teach you anything about, like, negotiation and contracts, and they don't teach you there's a life that exists that's not Monday through Friday plus some weekend call. So the fact that you were even thinking about these things, like, coming out of fellowship and residency and realizing that there was potentially something that was better out there for you is already, like, you know, lightning years ahead of where I was.
Yeah. I think at some point in burnout and like just exhaustion, the phrase that I hear that comes up, and I know that I was telling myself, is like, there has to be another way. Like, or there has to be a better way. Right. And I think when you're at that point, when you're like, something's got to give, there has to be something else. That's almost, it's like there's forced creativity. Like, you're going to have to come up with something because this is not working at all.
So how did you make it happen?
So I ended up starting locums work actually. And, locums is like, for people who don't know, it's like temp work for doctors. And they present you with different offers, different contracts, and you basically tell them what you're looking for. And they try to place you based on like your needs and the needs of like a hospital or clinic. And so in that, I was just very specific. Like, I really would prefer to work part time and for me, part time was like 4 days a week instead of five. Like, I felt like I was really pushing the envelope. Like, ooh, I'm going to ask for 4 days. Let me see. And then I was like, I really don't want to do 24 hours. Like, if it's a hospital-based thing and I have to do 20, I don't want it. Right. Like, give me outpatient, give me something else, and no weekends. So my first assignment, I got 4 days, no nights, no weekends, no 24s. And I was like, okay, they gave me what I wanted. It's kind of like you build from that, right? It's like after you've braved it and you've gotten the thing, that's when the confidence comes. Then you feel a little bit more like, okay, maybe I can talk about something. Maybe there's something to this.
And was this your first job out of residency, or had you worked already?
I mean, I had worked before medical school, like, so years before, but I hadn't been like, in the job force in some time, right? So, like, school and yeah, residency, and then I did a 2-year fellowship. So, like, I had not been in the workforce for like what, 9, 10 years, Like, it was a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, so you hit the ground running as soon as you came out. I love that.
Yeah, it was my first opportunity right after.
And did you continue with, like, your global health when you got out of fellowship, or how does that come into play with you?
Yeah. So that assignment actually was for a refugee camp working with the Afghan refugees as they were evacuating them out of Afghanistan during like the fall of the government and the takeover of the Taliban and like all of that. So it was like perfect fit for me. So it was like I got all of these elements that I really wanted just by listing out the things that I knew I needed to continue. Because honestly, at that point, I felt like I didn't even want to continue medicine. I was like, what else can I do with my life? Because this looks terrible.
Right, right. And so you continued, and now you're helping other women find their way as well.
Yeah, so I did locums for years, and now I'm doing at a peds office that's local to me. I'm doing it as a 1099, not as a locums. I work 2 days a week. I work like I don't really do weekends. I don't really, like I still have the same parameters, but I found something that didn't require as much travel for work. Now I just travel predominantly for leisure, which is amazing. But yeah, it was like I was able to create that and just keep building on that. And so, within my first like year out of training, I decided, well, let me teach other people how to negotiate, how to figure this out, and how can I make sure that like even my friends know about this, right? Or like even just like anyone who really needed to be able to speak up for themselves. How do they do that? How do they navigate the emotions it takes to do that, right? Like everyone's nervous, we all have the same thoughts going into a job and negotiating. It's like, are they going to reject my offer? Are they going to think I'm ungrateful? I don't want to ruffle feathers when I'm just starting out. I don't have X amount of experience. Like we have all of these thoughts that are happening in our brains that will make us compromise about something we really want before we even ask for it.
So what's the worst thing that's your, like, negotiation? Like, because again, we do have these, like, worst case scenarios of what could potentially happen. So what's the worst thing that's ever happened when you've been trying to negotiate with some of these companies?
Yeah, honestly, the worst thing that's ever happened is me telling myself no before they did. And I have an example of that. I was contracted to do some work up at a clinic, and I was like, "Oh, I would love to move from 4 days to 3 days, but, like, this is out of town. Are they gonna pay for me to come work 3 days a week? Meanwhile, they're paying for a hotel, like, 7 days a week." It just felt like a lot, like a big ask, right? Like, they're paying for my travel, they're paying for this, they're paying for that. So instead of asking for the 3 days, I asked for the 4. And then I got to the clinic on Monday and it was, like, empty. I was, like, one of the only people there. It was, like, me and a nurse practitioner, and I was like, "Where is the staff?" Like, I heard there was a team of, like, 3 nurse practitioners, a PA, like, like, a good amount of people. And they were like, "Oh, they all work 2 days a week." And I was like, "So everybody works 2 days a week?" And they were like, "Yeah, you're the only one who works 4." And I was like, "Wow." So imagine the disappointment, right? Like, I'm the one who let myself down, Like, I'm the one who didn't say what I wanted, and that turned out to actually be the norm for them. And I was going way above and beyond because I wouldn't say it. And I was like, that's literally probably the worst because, like, of course they can say no, right? And then you can just decide whether or not you want the opportunity or not, right? And if you need it financially or, for other conveniences, whatever, like because your family's there or whatever, then fine, you can decide where you want to compromise, right? But at least you know what they're willing to offer and what they're not. But when you tell yourself no first, you will never know what they are willing to give you. It's like you will never know until you get there, and then you're frustrated because 'cause you're the one who told yourself no.
And so when you're navigating these, like, contract negotiations, you mentioned, like, being able to negotiate, like, for time off. Are there other things that you'll ask for in those negotiations?
Oh, yeah. The list is endless. I love to give the example of I worked with a nurse practitioner, and she got 50% of her Ubers covered for the first 6 months because she didn't have a car. And I'm like, "You just don't think about any of that." Like, everybody thinks about money, and they're like, I need to know how much I'm making. They tell you you're trying to figure out how that breaks down bi-weekly or weekly, however often you get paid and what it looks like before and after taxes and right? Like that's the only thing people are focused on. But it could be additional paid time off. It could be additional CME money. It could be removing the non-competes out of the contract, right? It could be like relocation fees, bonuses. I've seen people get jobs for their spouse. I've seen people get visas for their family who doesn't even live in the country. Like, there's an endless amount of things you can negotiate for.
Oh, yeah, so and I think, like, locums gets, like, this really, like, boogeyman, big, bad, scary reputation, or at least it did when I was coming out of residency, like, the people who locums are doctors who don't have a home, where they're kinda, like, displaced, the orphan doctors, and they're not good doctors, and you see all these women and just physicians in general who are doing locums, and, these are, like, amazing doctors, like, they're people that I've worked with before, and, you realize that, like, I don't know if it was just, like, propaganda that was, like, being spewed at the time, but it's definitely not the case, and, there are good doctors out there. There are good locums jobs that you can find, and they're flexible, and that's the biggest thing. So when you're tied to a W-2, you have a lot less flexibility. So you have Monday through Friday schedule or, a certain number of hours that you have to meet each month, and it's hard to get out from that. Whereas when you're doing locums, you have that flexibility like you mentioned. The contracts aren't permanent, so maybe you decide that you're not comfortable working at that site, and then, 3 months from then, you decide to move on.
Yeah. You can give them 30 days notice. So locums is great for that.
I guess one of my concerns was always with locums that they could also give you the 30-day notice. So how has that worked out for you in terms of going to sites and finding that you don't have a contract, 6 months in or, 30 days from the time you started?
So I'm pretty finicky about my locums contracts. And actually, I prefer to do shorter contracts. I think like all of what you said really comes down to the fact that job security, like that definition has changed, right? Because job security used to mean long term, I'm in a spot, I know I'm going to get paid for doing X amount of whatever work for this set of time. Like I'm contracted to it, I'm secure. And in actuality, that's like a false sense of security because most job contracts, and I have read a lot of them, really they can give you like they can terminate you within the same time frame like the locums agents can. They just mostly don't, but they can, right? And it's the same thing with locums. It's like they They can, but they mostly don't. And I also think we have a mindset of scarcity that, like, we won't be able to find something else. We won't be able to find something better. We will be out of work. And I think like our brain automatically does like, oh my God, if I don't have a job, I'm gonna be homeless. I'm gonna be like, I'm not gonna be able to afford anything. Like, I'm not gonna be able to feed my family. Right. Like we go from like one extreme to the other. And for the most part, I think that that's not actually what happens. I think the longest I went without work was probably about 6 months, and part of that was, like, I was had scheduled vacation, but then it took some time to, like, find a new gig that matched my specific criteria, and also to get credentialed because I get credentialed in other states, so sometimes you have to apply for the licensing. So sometimes, like, that 6-month period, if you are not financially prepared for it, is a really long time, right? Without the certainty, like, I wanna get started at that point. So, like, yeah, I think there is that sense of risk. But for the most part, I think every job that I've had for locums, except for the ones that were like, if I was covering someone's maternity leave, which I know is like a 3-month contract, they've always wanted me to extend beyond what I wanted to extend. For the most part, I've been like, see you guys later. This is terrible. So I don't know. I think there is a lot of work out there. There are a lot of opportunities. You can have more than one opportunity at the same time, especially if you decide to do each place part time or if you want to be a fill in for somewhere, you can get established at a number of places and always kind of have a backup and create that kind of security for yourself.
And I know you've mentioned that you travel extensively, so obviously having a locums position and being able to create your own schedule and build flexibility around your own lifestyle is important. What are some of the travels that you've done with the flexibility that you created for yourself?
Yeah, so I would say tip for people who are doing locums, I try to do the shortest contract possible. So I try to do like a 2-month contract with potential to extend. So even if they want me to be there for like a year, I'm like, yeah, I'll just renew because that way every time I renew for like another month or another 2 months or another 3 months, I can put in new vacation dates. And be like, "Oh, yeah, I would love to extend except I do have these blackout dates that I can't cover." And so in doing that, I have traveled, like honestly, I think I've traveled, like, every month of, like, 2022, 23, and 24. I think I was, like, literally somewhere every month, and then last year and this year, I was like, "I need to slow down a little bit. This is a lot." But, yeah, I've been everywhere from, like, Bali and Singapore to, like, Mexico. Like, I've been everywhere.
And when you're going, how long are you usually going for your vacations?
It depends on the trip. So, like, if I'm flying to someplace like Bali, I'm gonna be there for like 2 to 3 weeks because it takes a whole day to get there. But I've done even just like long weekends, right? Like sometimes you just do a Thursday through Sunday or like a Friday through Monday or whatever. Especially if you decide to work part-time, right? If you work part-time, you automatically get a longer weekend if you position the days right. And so, yeah, I think that allows for like the ultimate flexibility and the ultimate way of like maximizing how to travel, right? Plus, with locums, you can accumulate points very easily. So you can use those points to travel. Like my boyfriend and I went to Morocco, we went to Turkey, we were in London, and like we never paid for a single hotel on any of those trips. 'Cause we had so many points. Well, I had so many points. Yeah, right? Yeah.
Like, you're speaking the language now, so so tell me about your points journey.
Yeah. When did I even start? I started definitely after training. But realizing, as someone who loves to travel, how quickly those expenses add up. And I'm sure if people looked like people looking at my Instagram or something, it's like those people you look and you're like, how are they affording to do all that stuff? Like, she must be rich. And I'm like, I can tell you, I got all the student loan debt. I am not rich. I- but you know, I think, like, realizing, like, "Oh, wait, there's, like, a whole system that you can use that allows you to, pay for things, right? And you pay for your normal everyday expenses and get rewarded for that. Why wouldn't I do that?"
Right. It seems like a no-brainer to me too, but often, like, people are like I feel like people still think it's like a scam. It's not real, and I really can't make this happen, or they're worried about, like, these excessive, like, credit card fees and, all these things, but I think it's nice to hear from other people that it's a reality that you can make happen, and especially if you're someone who has lots of expenses, or if you're doing locums, that's a good way to rack up some expenses that can be paid off by, the locums provider. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, that's literally been it. The first year that I did locums, I like the refugee camps were in other places, right? So like those are hotel points out the wazoo, right? So and I was like, "Oh, wait, I've accumulated." I think I was thinking like a Hilton chain. And I was like, "I've accumulated so many points at this Hilton chain. Let me switch to Marriott cuz I'm It's like I'm gonna switch to Marriott too." And if you like charge it on your card first and let the company reimburse you, then you get the credit card points and you have the hotel points. So it's like a double win, you know? And then of course, like I said, being out of town, like you're just naturally likely to eat out more or, to like spend in a different way. And so I feel like all of those expenses you should try to be getting some kind of points for. And based on that, because I had both credit card points, which I can use at different, partnering companies, and the hotel points, like we were able to travel so much, and like I got status on all these hotels because I was basically living in hotels through locums. So even when I went to travel with my points, right? Like I was getting all these upgrades and like so I'm using like minimal points, getting upgrades, like it's inclusive of things. The thing that people don't realize is like they say it takes money to make money and it really is true in that like it's also about perception, right? Because having status in these places or having like loyalty points or being a member of any of these organizations, you end up getting more things for free than if you pay for everything out of pocket. So I'm like, you literally end up are getting more just by, participating in these kinds of programs. So I don't know. For me, it was a total win.
Yeah. So you're a Hilton or a Marriott girl?
I'm both actually. Because any local assignment I had, I like will do half and half at each hotel so that I can maintain my my top perks. Like I became a Marriott ambassador, which is like their highest member. And I didn't even know this was a thing. Like they literally assign an ambassador to you that will like take care of any arrangements you have. Like you can call this person for free and like they will settle any problems for you. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like you have no idea this world that can be open to you by just using points. I'm like, I did not spend the money it would take to be an ambassador. I just used points and it was amazing.
In any airline that you're flying often or
I fly Delta probably the most consistently. So Delta's really good about that, like giving you little perks and upgrades and things. And like the Delta lounge is lounging. I feel like lounging at the airport is great. Like, and I think you can get all those perks through your card anyway. Like I have an Amex Platinum, right? And also have business credit. So because I run a business. So between my personal expenses and my business expenses, like Amex gives you, you know, automatic lounge benefits. Like there's an Amex Centurion lounge in all these major airports, right? So you go to the airport and I feel like it's totally changed even my experience at the airport, right? TSA pre-check and global entry covered by Amex. Like it's reimbursed. So I'm like, you skip the lines, you go sit in the lounge, you get free food, you get on your flight. Like it's really nice.
yeah. Which is nice to have, especially if you're traveling for work, so that means you're on the go all the time and you wanna be able to have those comforts and not, have the inconveniences that you realize exist when you think about what it was like before you had any type of status or before you had these, like, travel credit cards or perks or, global entry, a pre-check and things that kinda just streamline the whole process for you and just make it a much more comfortable travel experience, so
It's so much it's like being rich without being rich. It's like you get all the perks of, like, everyone who's actually rich, even though, you're just doing your regular things.
this regular thing. And then which card are you using more often, do you think?
I split between 2. I use my Amex quite a bit, and I also have a Chase Sapphire as well that I use. So, those are probably my 2 main cards that I'm using that I get a lot of like travel related perks from.
And then when you're not traveling for work and you're traveling for just fun, like, what's been your, like, favorite place thus far?
God, that's so hard because it really depends on like what you're traveling for. Like, are you going for adventure or relaxation? I think one of my favorite countries was Costa Rica, which is like it's close enough, the flight's not that long, but they have every type of environment, like if you want to go to the beach, they have beaches. If you want to be in the mountains, explore the volcanoes, go to the hot springs, they have that. If you want to be in the rainforest, they have that. So I feel like those probably one of my favorites. I did like Peru, Ecuador, they both have great like Ecuador has the Galapagos, Peru has Machu Picchu. Like there's just so much fun things to see and so many cultural things to see and good food to eat. So, yeah,
Books with points?
booked with points.
Yes. And what hotels did you stay at?
So I mostly stay, like I said, mostly I use Marriott and Hilton chains, but they both have like boutique hotel options. So usually I try to find like boutique hotel options that are nice. I think my favorite one was the one in Turkey. It was the most beautiful boutique, like Hilton boutique hotel, like a curio. They have a curio collection that is amazing. And just like it was the most beautiful hotel I've ever been in, I think. So
Yeah. I'm always looking for, like, new ideas of places to go, so I'm like, "You've been to all these places, let me pick your brain, let me see what you have up your s."
yeah, I could give you a totally like a full list. Like yeah, I think there's just some beautiful, beautiful places. I think, even if you don't use the main chain, like I said, if you tap into their like special collection hotels, it's like superb.
Well, I love that you're changing the way that people are doing medicine. I love that you're expanding our ability to believe that there is something else that's out there for us. And it's not just, like I said, 9 to 5. I go to work every day. I keep grinding, keep grinding. And then eventually I'll get to the end where I have time for travel and I'll be able to take a couple extra days off without, sacrificing my income and compromising my relationships with my job because they're not going to want me to take this time off. Because I think again it's a very real fear for many of us as physicians, and I'm sure many people in other healthcare professions as well. So
For sure. I think one of the things to keep in mind is that when you like no one's giving you their best first offer, right? So like they always leave room for negotiation. And so negotiate up, right? Because you can make money. You would literally just be leaving that money on the table. Like you never want to work a job where every day you're in there saying to yourself, I don't get paid enough for this, right? Like that's the worst feeling. So I would say always negotiate up. And the more you earn, the less you have to work. Right? So, like, I literally can afford to work 2 days a week because of how I had negotiated, you know? And so, like, if I didn't negotiate for that dollar amount, I would have to work more to compensate for it. So, always negotiate. Always think about what you want your life to be, like, as a whole, not just your work life, but what else do you want? Like I love to travel and I really want that to be part of my regular life. And so how do I create that? What would that look like? Not with the limitations, just like allow yourself to fully dream about it. What would that actually look like? What does it mean in terms of work days and hours and responsibility? And then ask for those things. And you're likely to get a lot more than you actually anticipate.
I guess one question: do you have any advice for anyone who maybe has a family or maybe they were tied to a certain location for various reasons and they can't just pick up their lives and you know fly an hour or 2 hours away to do locums? Like, what advice do you have for someone who's in that situation?
Yeah, I would say first of all, there's local locum opportunities, right? Like my last three positions were in New York City, which is where I live, right? So you can find opportunities locally. I think it doesn't have to be through an agency. My current job I created by calling them and I asked them, are they willing to hire me as a 1099 part-time pediatrician? Right. So going in the door with that expectation of like, hey, are you guys open to this? And them being like, yes, then you're like, okay, I have a foundation on which to build the job that I desire, right? I think being very clear about that is how you create the opportunities. I think if you're in a current job, you can always renegotiate your contract. You can always ask, right? It never hurts to ask. I think, paying attention to how it is impacting your life and what tweaks you would make, even small ones, make such a significant difference in your regular life. So even if it's like, I need an MA assigned to me personally, or I need help with scribing, or I need AI scribes or something. Like all of that is negotiation. Asking for what you need at work, if it makes your life easier, if it means you don't have to chart it home, right? Or on weekends, you should always be looking for how to make yourself a more efficient, happier employee because honestly, happier employees stay. And your job wants you to stay because it costs a lot of money to do recruitment. That's what people don't know. It's very expensive to have an open position, right? That's numbers of patients that are not being seen that they cannot recoup in revenue. So if you remember that, they actually want you to stay. So what does it look like if you stay in this job? Right? What do you need to tweak? What do you need to ask for? What conversations do you need to have? And just go from there. And if they say no, then you know that you will never get that thing in that job, perhaps, right? And that maybe you need to start opening yourself to other opportunities. But either way, you end with information.
I love that you said all those things, and I think it's always inspiring to have these conversations, with any physician who's out there, again, doing something that goes against the grain, but especially coming from a pediatrician, because I think, going into peds, a lot of times people think, this is the lowest paid field in medicine, for many reasons, and I don't have options, and, I have all these loans, and I have all these other things that I wanna do, and I'm behind the ball in terms of, like, getting my investment started, planning for my financial so to see you, like, out there and saying, "I'm a pediatrician, and I was able to create this life for myself, and I was able to negotiate so that way I have the flexibility and I have the income that, I need to meet my needs," is just really inspiring, so I hope other people are listening and also see that, but I just wanted to point that out because, again, I think if you're in medicine, you already know these things, but if you're someone from outside of medicine and you're some other healthcare professional, you don't realize that, yeah, like, this is coming from someone who is a pediatrician and who has you go in and I think it's kind of, like, ingrained in us, from, in medicine that, primary care, pediatricians, family medicine docs, internists, you're not gonna make a lot of money, you are gonna be working a lot, you don't have the, edge up that people in the physicians who are in, like, procedural specialties or surgeons have, and so I think seeing that you have these opportunities that are available to you and that you don't have to be pigeonholed and stuck in, this little box that they try to put you in as, as a primary care doctor.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's helpful and applicable to anyone who's like thinking about negotiation is that people feel like, oh, I don't know how to do it. A, all you have to do is ask a question, right? Like there is no right way to do it. You just want to ask. And I think the other thing is people are like, oh, I don't feel confident. And confidence is not something that comes before you do something, it comes after. It's after you've done something multiple times and then you start to do it well, that's when you become confident, and I think people forget that, which is like it's part of our medical journey, right? Like, as a med student, we were not confident about anything, right? Even as an intern in residency, we were not confident, right? But we got every day we showed up, we took the history, we followed our little papers, right? Like, you just repeated and repeated and repeated until you felt, like, confident, and probably years down the line in attendinghood, then you're like, "Okay, I at least know these things. I feel confident about this specific thing," you know? But it's because you've done it for years. And I think the same thing happens with negotiation is like you just start having the conversations and you continue to have conversations over time and ask questions and figure things out. And it's very similar to that. And then, of course, you can become confident. So now I confidently can be like, yeah, I would never work part time. I mean, I would never work full time again. But there was times when I didn't feel like that. Right? It was like, "Ooh, let me figure out how to ask and let me see," and I felt scared, but the point is you do it anyway, right? Because at the end of it, the result is worth it. And it's the same journey like when you're in healthcare. You go through the struggles, but the result is worth it.
Right. And that was very therapeutic for me, thanks. As I'm trying to navigate my own, like, W-2 locums 1099 journey and, creating flexibility and creating this life by design and not, not the default. It's encouraging to hear other people's stories as they're doing the things, that the things that you're afraid to do doors that you're afraid to walk through. So and you help other women.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I've been doing that for a while, right? Just like coaching other women through it because I think it's more than just a one conversation. I think people think the time to start negotiating is like when they get the offer. And I'm like, no, it's before that, right? It's deciding what you want when you're even applying for the job, because then you won't apply for jobs that are just a bad fit for you, and just like the idea that it's like, it's the whole thing is negotiation and you've been doing it for a long time, right? And so you actually have the skill set, how to be discerning, how to make decisions. And so just tapping into things that you already do well, right? And going from there. So,
Yeah. Well, I know there are lots of listeners out there who perhaps are in this situation. Maybe they feel stuck and maybe they don't know where to go. How can they reach out to you and get some of your assistance and, some of this coaching that you're giving us here that you're giving us with right now?
yeah, so I'm at the Block Doctor on like a ton of platforms like Instagram and Facebook. And I have a podcast, the Block Doctor Collective. And on the podcast, I pretty much tell like all of these things, right? And I go through contracts that I've gone through with my own clients and my own contracts. And I tell you like, what's the worst contract I've ever read, or like, what's something crazy that I've negotiated, and so I tell a lot of stories on the podcast. Most people can actually probably listen to the podcast and walk away with a new way of doing something. And then if not, right, if they like need more nuance, or what, like they want a specific contract review or things like that, like, you can of course reach out to me. My email is also theblackdoctor@gmail, right? So there's like lots of ways to, or they can DM me on Instagram, whatever. Lots of ways for me to like come in and help you. And we can do a short-term contract review, or we can do a longer process, whatever it is. But yeah, for me, I'm like very happy to support women in medicine, and especially women because women tend not to negotiate. But yeah, just because I think we are the workforce, right? And we are the ones who, the studies say, I mean, I'm not to be biased, but the studies do say that women physicians tend to have better patient outcomes. The studies say it's in the science. So so yeah, I think, retaining women in medicine is something that more institutions to be focused on. They're not. So let's do it, right? Like how, what do you need to stay in your medical career? And like let's create that.
And do you find that there are certain challenges that are more specific to Black women or Black physicians?
Yeah, of course. I think, we don't want to practice everywhere, right? So I think just the like what you want exists, but it does not exist everywhere, right? So I think that's the first part, which is why people have a sense of scarcity, right? It's like, oh, I don't think I'm going to find what I want. But that's not true. Like you can find what you want. It doesn't exist everywhere. And I think for us, like we're usually very like regionally specific, right? We want to go to places that are going to be welcoming to us, right? That are not going to, feel scary or actually be scary. So I think in terms of like our pool, sometimes we feel limited on like where we can travel or where we can work, where we can set down roots. So I think that that's specific. I think that, there's a lot of ingrained biases against Black women, like there's the angry Black woman trope. There's the like people feeling threatened by you if you decide to be assertive. And so a lot of people will downplay that and try to be, people pleasing and nice, and just so that they can not feel like stressed or ostracized in some way. So I do think like navigating those conversations there is a nuance to it, because you want to do it in a way that doesn't make you feel threatened, because it's a real safety issue, right? And so I think, yeah, those things are very different when you are approaching something with two things that people discriminate against, both race and gender. So, and also age, right? So like sometimes it's three things that people are judging you for. Um and yeah, so how do you navigate that, and how do you deal with your own internal like messaging, right? Especially based on messaging you've received from the external world for a lifetime. So yeah, I think there's a lot of a depth to it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you highlighting those nuances because those are things that don't necessarily get explored in some of the other like coaching programs. So I think it's important to highlight that you do bring that extra nuance to the table when it comes to negotiating, helping women navigate some of those pathways.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
So I'll be sure to leave all of your information in the show notes so that way people can reach out to you if they just want to get some help or if they just want to follow along on the podcast. I know I am now newly subscribed and I'll be listening as well as I am navigating my own journey and helping other women and people who want to get out of the rat race and just again create this life that is a life that they imagined and not the life that they've been pigeonholed into when they decided to sign on the contract and become physicians. So
Yeah, that's literally it, like, you are not stuck, you are not trapped. So, yeah, shake it up.
thank you so much for being here. Thank you guys all for listening to the Prescription of Travel MD podcast, and we'll see you next time.